I'm Tim Ventura from AmericanAntiGravity.com, and I'm speaking today with David Sereda on the new documentary Dan Ackroyd Unplugged on UFOs. Well, thanks for joining us, David. I appreciate your spending the time to educate us a little bit about the new documentary. What can you tell us offhand about it?
Well, first off, it's we've when you really look at all the big blockbuster movies in Hollywood, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I think it grossed in 1977 380 million worldwide. Which, when you convert those numbers at the U.S. Institute of Economics with their inflation calculator, it comes to 1.1 billion dollars today. And Steven Spielberg's E.T., which grossed just around $1 billion in the 1980s, converts to 1.6 billion in today's dollars. So UFOs are still at the top of the heap in Hollywood, and I think the reason is the public really is intrigued by the idea that we're not alone in the universe. And so Dan Aykroyd, in this film he did with me, Unplugged on UFOs, we're really going on a crusade right now. I mean, we've been on CNN, Anderson Cooper, Rita Cosby, MSNBC, other CNN shows, Greta Van Susteren on Fox, and doing the gamut of radio shows. And Dan is just so enthusiastic about, coming to the world with a handful of expert witnesses in this film. Astronaut Gordon Cooper testifies to his sightings. Paul Hellyer, the Minister of Defense Canada, testifies that UFOs are as real as the airplanes that fly over your head. U.S. Air Force retired Ken Storch tells a case of where we nearly went to World War III with Russia, misinterpreting a signal, thinking that they were missiles. Instead, they were actually UFOs. And we have John Schuessler, a retired NASA contractor and head of MUFON, and many others, cameo appearances to back Ackroyd up in the film. But there's also just a slew of the best, most incredible UFO footage to date. Some of the newest stuff out of Phoenix. We have cameos of the Phoenix Lights case. There's just, really, it's a really amazing, piece of history here to say that, we're no longer fictionalizing this in Hollywood. We have a Hollywood representative who's saying it's real.
Yeah, well, and that's a big step forward. I mean, in the past, Hollywood definitely gives UFOs a lot of attention, but there's always this sleight of hand going on. It's, we're going to pay lip service to UFOs, but we're never going to do anything serious about it. And so the public comes away, with all these disjointed opinions and ideas about it, but there's nobody really driving it forward, or at least until now. So.
Yeah, and what's already starting to happen is just at the film has just come out. It's on Best Buy online, it's on Blockbuster online, but it's not physically in a lot of stores yet. It's in some. But what's already happening is I'm getting, emails from rock stars and other celebrities who are saying that they want to tell their story. So, of seeing a UFO, and what I think is going to happen is you're going to see that Dan is the first courageous individual to step forward, and now you're going to see other celebrities and other musicians coming forward to say, yeah, I saw one too. So it's kind of the first step in disclosure is the arts community coming forward, and then we're hoping that more and more expert witnesses come forward because of the other expert witnesses we have in the film. So it's kind of the step towards disclosure, and some of the video evidence and photographic evidence of the UFOs is really undeniable. I really believe it's some of the best footage out there that we've seen. And having seen my own UFO, actually, the case of me seeing my own UFO in Berkeley in 1968 is really starting to explode now, because I'm talking about that a lot on the radio. And the UFO that I saw was probably hovering 3,500 feet, just looking due north in the East Bay in Berkeley, just off of the mountain where the Berkeley National Lab is. And of course, that is one of the top physics labs in our country. And there are people who are writing me now from the Berkeley compound, who are wondering about my sighting, because there's no question that for a full 20 minutes that people up at the Berkeley lab would have seen it, and it's possible they may have had something to do with it.
The UFO topic is, even in the anti-gravity community, it's a hot button topic. Everybody has very strongly held opinions, I guess, about it. And one of the things that just bothers me to no end, it's just troubling, I guess, is that people are subject to as much or more discrimination than ever. Now, yeah, you've said that you had some difficulties with some of the interviews, right?
Well, I've had difficulties getting, jetted off the air. Like, when I was on the Coast to Coast AM show the first time in the year 2000, debating with James Oberg, a former NASA Houston control operator, about the fact that NASA had special cameras to see into the invisible ultraviolet and infrared. And I verified that fact at NASA. And at that moment, the show was turned off. The satellite that broadcast the show turned off, and the internet stream turned off, and they're not even on the same technological systems. And then another time, I was doing a radio show on FM 93.1 out of St. Louis, and they had 20 million listeners, Republican radio. And 15 minutes into the show, the whole station went down, dead. And that's happened several times more than even that. But those are two of the biggest stations I've done where there's shutdowns. But no one has ever personally interrogated me.
Oh, okay. So it hasn't really been direct. It's more of the indirect stuff that I think a lot of people who discuss UFOs have talked about then. Well,
it's also getting attacked. Like, even since the Ackroyd film has come out, I mean, there was one, scathing review where some of these reviewers they're insulting Dan Ackroyd, they're insulting Gordon Cooper, and it just seems like there's somebody's getting paid and somebody is afraid of this actually coming out. It's kind of like the film they don't want you to see. And it's weird when you see someone who's as loved as Dan Ackroyd getting these huge attacks, saying, who is he and why does he think he knows so much about UFOs? Well, Dan Ackroyd's been studying UFOs since he was a kid in the 1950s, and he's been studying him ever since. He is the most single knowledgeable person on the subject in Hollywood, despite people like David Bowie who have also testified to seeing UFOs. Bowie has never come forward publicly to disclose it.
sure. Well, the reason I asked about that was I've almost been operating on this idea that maybe it's a cultural immune system.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I won't dismiss the Men in Black idea, but definitely that cultural immune system. This is weird. I'm not sure if I want to be connected with it. I'm not going to participate, or I'm going to follow along with what I think is the mainstream view and make fun of it. That kind of a and we see that with anti-gravity. We see it with free energy and zero point energy research. But I guess the part that's troubling there is in our society, one of the fundamental ideas behind America was this idea of freedom of expression, right? In terms of
Mm-hmm.
you can well, go out in public and tell the guy standing next to you that you believe in God, and not only will most people not have any kind of problem with that, but you have some legal protections there as well,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of one of the hallmarks of our society, and
Mm-hmm.
I guess the question for me is, is America about protecting the beliefs that it was founded on, or is it about protecting belief in general? You
No,
know?
I agree with you, and there's a great power in labeling an individual today who like yourself and me who is involved in this field. And when you go out there and for myself, getting into the mainstream media I either get edited severely, like for example when Peter Jennings interviewed me for the UFO special. They asked the best questions for a television network I had ever encountered, and they edited everything out in my interview except for about, I don't know, 45 seconds to a minute is all they used.
Yeah.
And when I just did, actually a while back, I used to work in bomb detection for a Department of Defense company. We revolutionized a new system for detecting explosives for landmines and for airport security. And right now, X-ray machines cannot find bombs accurately. They can only see pictures. And if a terrorist, disguises plastic explosives, C4 or RDX, in the shape, for example, of a video camera battery, and some of these batteries are quite large, the X-ray machine would never see it. And the CAT scan, the alarm might go off for density. But the problem is C4 and RDX have similar densities to sugar, chocolate, regular plastics, cheese, all kinds of things. So a lot of times you go through the airport and the alarm goes off, but they never really find anything. So what we did is developed a detector that non-intrusively scans the target, and it knows the chemical contents of what the object in question is made out of. So we would know if something was a bomb. Well, after 9/11, NBC News contacted me. They interviewed me, and then these two California anonymous attorneys filed this public lawsuit, David Sereda and the people of the United States versus the manufacturers of Envision Technologies, who makes the X-ray machines, for falsely claiming they can actually find explosives.
Sure, sure.
And also, during the 9/11 attacks, the terrorists in the cell phone said they have a bomb on board. And also, in Flight 587, that blew up over New York a month later, all the eyewitnesses said they saw it blow up. The FBI confiscates the video cameras, and which would mean they had bombs on the plane. So NBC, Dateline, and Dow Jones News, every news station was on the phone with me about this lawsuit that was filed, and they were going to do a huge expose and use my idea to get 40 federal agents to walk explosives through screeners at airports and to prove that X-ray machines can't find the bombs. Well, they searched my name on Google, and they found, of course, what you and everybody knows in our audience, that I'm involved in this alternative stuff. And they phoned me up and they said, "Did you write such and such a book? And did you write this book and that book?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Everything is canceled. We cannot have you become a household name." And they canceled it, and I said, "Oh, if you're going to cancel it, at least find a replacement, because it's really important for American security that we do this story." They never found a replacement, and only this year did NBC do the same thing. They walked explosives through 40 airports undetected, and this was just months ago on NBC News. And the story ran for 2 days, and nothing, no comment from Homeland Security, nothing.
Hmm.
And I had been, involved in this case very passionately for years. And just because I'm involved in this UFO stuff and other stuff, I'm like blacklisted.
Well,
And
that's an excellent, no, that's an amazingly good point in terms of, I think one of the things that we see in the UFO community, anti-gravity certainly the same way. I think there are a lot of crossover between those two cultures, but one of the big ones is that it's not what the stereotype is. The stereotype is, it's almost like the Star Trek convention, right? You see people standing in lines with the Vulcaneers and stuff, and I think people
mhm,
think a lot of the same things about people who believe in UFOs, or even just willing to accept the idea that they're here. And the reality is quite different. In my own contacts, I mean, you've got scientists, professors, military professionals, all the way up the ladder. Tons of people over at NASA, people in almost every major government agency out there who are dead sure convinced that UFOs are here. They just don't really know what to do with it, and they're scared to death about going public. That it's the fear factor, and I've seen that more often than not. And to be honest, it's something that I don't talk about myself very often. As we've discussed privately in the past, I saw a UFO in 1994, and it's one of those things that it's difficult to talk about because there's always this worry, is this going to affect my career? Is this going to mean that I won't get hired at this or that place? Will this come back to be at an inappropriate time? Will I do a solid article on something else and then have them say, "Oh well, but he saw a UFO, that means he's nutty." Well,
mhm, mhm.
that's one of the
Yeah, there's
reasons.
there's that, and I've even, as all these retired kind of major physicists from major universities, always have discussions with me. And recently, I was talking to Gary Zeitlin, who got his PhD at Cornell University and did a lot of work at Berkeley. In fact, he was one of the ones who was interested in, he's been very interested in anti-gravity, and he's been very interested in UFO technology, and works with people like Paul Laviolette. And he told me he personally believed that Carl Sagan was possibly hired to debunk UFOs, and he said there were a lot of people in the universities who were interested in the UFOs and anti-gravity, and especially anti-gravity, which to me, the most that we can get out of the UFO movement is the actual technology with which they move, which is anti-gravity and zero-point energy stuff. And he's saying that all of those efforts and interests at the major universities at Berkeley and Cornell were shut down by people like Carl Sagan. So the question is why? Why would we shut down at the research level the research on anti-gravity when we have everything to gain from it? And if a country like China or Russia or Iran, where they're actually spending money on UFO research, and even India, they're spending money on anti-gravity research, and we're not, supposedly, what's going to happen if they figure it out first? They have the air superiority advantage. Our Air Force will be made a mockery of. And if they decide to become violent. They have the potential to take us over.
Well,
And
that's been kind of a personal pet peeve of mine in terms of public perception. I think that unfortunately a lot of the Men in Black stories about, there was one the other day about a secret United States Space Navy. And a lot of that has cultural value, right? It's a fun story to listen to. It's the kind of thing that you hear on Coast. You don't want to change the channel, but in terms of real world spending on, what are UFOs, or how do we modify gravity? I'm not aware of any government spending in any agency uh, right now on gravity modification. In fact, NASA this last December, we had done a presentation for Mike Griffin at NASA on how to work with the community to make breakthrough propulsion a reality, something that NASA could feel proud about working with the public on.
mhm, mhm.
And at the same time, NASA was very quietly busy pulling the plugs. They no longer have the capability to do breakthrough propulsion physics research. They
Yeah,
literally got.
Mark Millis's lab was getting $50,000 a year, and other people at NASA that I'm in contact with are really interested. I've had personally a meeting at what do you call it in New Mexico. The I don't know why I'm blanking out on the name on it right now. Uh, the national. I don't know why I can't remember. You know the lab in New Mexico where the atomic bomb was developed.
Oh, well, let me see. There's
Los Alamos.
Los Alamos, yeah.
Los Alamos National Lab. I had a scientist contact me there from a huge department head, and we had a long discussion after he saw my film evidence the case for NASA UFOs. He got transferred to the Johnson Space Center, and I never heard from him again. And he was really interested in the idea of testing some of these ideas. And I also have gotten calls from people at the Johnson Space Center, but they all say the same thing: there's no money for anti-gravity and exotic propulsion research. Well, if there's no money there, is there money somewhere? And if there is money somewhere, I mean, if even at the university level at Berkeley National Lab and Cornell, people like Carl Sagan are debunking UFOs like crazy and trying to stifle any interest in the subject from the inside, I mean, this is a huge mistake in my opinion. I mean, a massive mistake. We have everything to gain from this. So why the squashing? Who's paying for this? And the only thing that makes sense to me is that it really has happened. There have been true crash retrievals at Roswell and pre-Roswell, the Battle of 42. In the film Dan Ackroyd Unplugged on UFOs, there's a segment on the Battle of 42 and the George C. Marshall memorandums that lead to crash retrievals. If we really have retrieved them and reverse engineered them, then someone wants to keep this secret, and they've been doing it for a long time. Because I saw a successful UFO hovering successfully using anti-gravity with no noise near the Berkeley National Lab, and with hundreds of witnesses on the street that day. So somebody's doing it, and whether it's us or an extraterrestrial civilization, it's most likely an extraterrestrial civilization. But if we have mastered it ourselves, it doesn't make sense to me that we wouldn't use it. I mean, when you think about anti-gravity, I mean, you think about the ability to levitate a giant chunk of ice or an iceberg, a huge, quantity of water, and levitate it and bring it to a dry lake bed and bring water to drought-stricken regions. You can in Africa or California or Mexico or anywhere, and that's profound. I mean, use of anti-gravity. So the question is why? Why wouldn't we be doing it?
Oh yeah. Well, it gives us ready access to space, and I think like Robert Heinlein said, and as Richard C. Hoagland often repeats, if you can reach space, you're halfway to anywhere. And in terms of just what it allows us to do, I mean, asteroid mining. Jerry Pournelle was writing about that 25 years ago. In terms of,
Yeah.
the money that corporate America would make mining one asteroid for its metals would outweigh the return on everything they make right now. And the reason is it's so much easier to do things like for instance, right now to get metals out of the earth, you basically have to dig a hole at some point and mine them and then carry the bulk up and transport it. And then there are a ton of environmental laws that you have to follow. But in space, it could literally be as simple as pointing large solar reflectors at an asteroid and melting the metals to the surface. And Cornell had thought that you could parachute them back down to the earth pretty effectively.
Oh
So
yeah. I mean, there's everything to gain from this, and there's nothing to lose. You can build new monolithic stone statues, not stone statues. I mean, like the Great Pyramids, monolithic structures out of stone masonry. I mean, the one of the reasons stone masonry has fallen away is because it's so time consuming and so expensive in today's labor community to make buildings out of stone. But stone structures outlast, brick and tile and wood and beam construction by thousands of years.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
you think of how long the Great Pyramids have lasted. If we can levitate giant stones and build enormous universities and research centers, those structures will be around forever. And you can build them in the most remote places. I mean, it's almost like Lord of the Rings. I mean, imagine building giant temples up in the peaks of the Andes and the Himalayas and the great mountains of California. I mean, you don't have to have these roads leading in and hauling slabs of steel and stone and construction materials in to make buildings in those kind of places.
Well,
It,
that's one of my worries in terms of construction too is you'd
mm,
mentioned the length that these monuments can stick around,
mm,
and my own personal concern is roads. Up here in the
mm,
Seattle area, I would say most of Seattle, especially the east side where I'm at, but this area was really built out in the 1970s. I think there was a large influx of immigration back then, and they did a ton of new road construction.
mm,
I think my street was built in 1980, and the pavement is already cracked. And
mm,
when you compare that to how the Romans used to construct things, like the Appian Way. I mean, people are still driving their little Italian sports cars down the Appian Way,
yeah,
and it was because the Romans would build a road 6 feet deep as well as 6 feet wide. It was almost like a
right.
wall that was flush with the ground. But you
That's
know,
amazing.
on
Yeah.
the West Coast, another 20 years goes by, and I don't know if we'll have any infrastructure left.
Mhm. No, I agree, but that's those are some of the benefits to anti-gravity in the local environment, but also ultimately, if we share it evenly amongst the entire planet, we can solve incredible problems with it, and ultimately, exploring the solar system and the universe much more efficiently. And what we have to gain from that is just incredible. I mean, why we're holding this back, why it's so secret, why are UFOs? I mean, even in my film, when you have expert witnesses like Gordon Cooper, who's a U-2 test pilot, an astronaut, a fighter pilot, World War II veteran, and he says he chased UFOs in Germany that outperformed him and his jets in the most advanced ways, making radical sharp turns. And they filmed one landing at Edwards Air Force Base in 1957. When he says that he's an expert witness, it means it's true. It doesn't mean he's making things up. And then you have astronaut Edgar Mitchell saying that UFOs are real, who walked on the moon, and you have Air Force pilots. I mean, it's not fiction anymore when expert witnesses testify. But I hear even from people in the media that there's still no evidence. Well, in a court of law, expert witness testimony is evidence, and it's enough to convict if it's enough to convict a criminal of a criminal offense, then it's enough to say that we truly have an anti-gravity phenomenon. And that's what I'm hoping this film is going to do. It's going to wake people up to the fact disclosure is happening. It has happened. You're just not paying enough attention.
Well, speaking of disclosure, one of the things that I'd like to ask, because Dr. Stephen Greer did a lot for UFO disclosure a few years ago, and
Mhm.
he seems to have faded out a little bit. And I understand a lot of that was the timing. His major thrust forward with disclosure happened right before September 11th, and some of that's just unavoidable. I mean,
Mhm.
nobody knew it at the time, but it was just horrible timing to go forward with that. But do you feel like the film you're making ties into his work, or is it maybe almost superseding it? I guess in a way.
Well, no, it ties into it. I think what Greer did is phenomenal with the expert witness program on video, testifying to to seeing or chasing or encountering UFOs, commercial airline pilots, military pilots, and he also got Gordon Cooper to testify. And when you have that many expert witnesses, you have disclosure. The problem is the media made fun of it. So how does the media get the audacity to make fun of national heroes and expert witnesses? I mean, in a court of law, if disclosure were to enter the U.S. Supreme Court, it would win, and we would prove to the world that we're dealing with this phenomena. The problem is the media is so powerful, and whoever controls them are so powerful that they simply cannot accept it. They won't
Well,
open their eyes and say, yes, we have countless expert witness testimony. But my film, I get some of the key witnesses, the most powerful cases in the disclosure process, and a major celebrity combined with them to say, yes, we have disclosure, and
You know,
that's
yeah, I would agree with you there, and I would even take it a step further, and I think that it's a problem that's endemic to the media, and that's why alternative media venues, hopefully American Anti-Gravity, certainly, Dan Ackroyd, the case for UFOs, these documentaries and independent films are bleeding off the audience that used to be with the mainstream news. But to me, it makes perfect sense as somebody who follows technology. I love technology, and I read Wired magazine and Popular Science, and I watch Discovery and a lot of those channels. And there are some venues
mm,
that do a decent job. Discovery Channel does a pretty decent job with some things, but when I turn on mainstream news, right, Fox News, CNN, NBC News, things like that, the ones that everybody watches, the ones that really affect the entire country, you
mm,
see stuff like this focus on unfortunate tragic deaths, like I believe the Natalie Holloman case. I think that was one, or Holloway. And
mm,
it's tragic. It is definitely just it's horrifying to see these things happen, but at the same time these aren't events that impact everybody. These aren't
mm,
the I don't know, just it doesn't seem like that should be front page news, not for a day or a week but for a month. So and it's not just that case, it's this case, then the next case, then the next case, and
mm.
it seems almost as if they seek out stories that have no real relevancy. I mean, when I turn on the news, I don't, unfortunately, hear about anything that impacts my own life. The
No, I
economy,
know.
yeah,
I
or
mean, what they're forcing us to watch in these news networks. I mean, I used to have major cable, and you know, I've just got to say, I just to get rid of it.
yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan of some of the channels. Like Science Channel does a pretty decent job. National Geographic Channel, these are like on the higher end, channel, I don't know, 300 something. But they do a decent job, but they really have such a broad scope that they don't deal with emerging technologies. Again, they're not dealing with today's news. It's more historical events, but yeah, I think that in terms of the channels that everybody watches, the ones where people, plunk themselves down on the couch and turn on the tube, Sci-Fi Channel, I watch that, and I actually get more out of that than I do from mainstream news because
Mm,
personally, I don't hear about the economy. I don't hear anything real about the war. I have no idea what's going on in Iraq. You
mm,
know, um, so I think that's part of it in terms of UFOs. I think that the media has really made a decision in the past saying we're not going to cover this, or if we do, we're going to poke
and who's
fun at it.
controlling them? Because when you have the expert witnesses in disclosure, how do you deny that? How does the media deny that? You cannot deny expert witnesses. If you deny them, you deny everything.
Well,
You really deny everything.
I think that denying the expert witnesses is very damaging. I mean, if the fellow, went to the moon, well, if he's making up stories about UFOs that aren't true, what does that mean? Does that mean that maybe he wasn't a good pilot after all and he couldn't see straight, or does that mean that he's some kind of a compulsive liar? I don't think so. I think it means that these were
No, I
the
mean,
best
who
of
are
the
they
best.
to say that? I mean, even James Oberg at NASA has said that Gordon Cooper, well, he's ill, but Cooper was dying of Parkinson's disease, which is not a schizophrenia. Parkinson's, you lose control of your faculties of your body, the ability to move certain muscles, etc. But that doesn't make you produce hallucinations. It doesn't make you. In fact, Gordon Cooper's experiences occurred when he was, perfectly functional and healthy, and he testified to those experiences very early in his life in his book Leap of Faith. The Parkinson's disease slowly creeped up on him in his old age, but he never wavered. He had those experiences, and so you cannot. In the court of law, you cannot deny an expert witness testimony. And when you have multiple expert witness testimonies, it is real. I mean, you can't evade that in a court of law. So I would like to see disclosure go into the U.S. Supreme Court and take the video testimony that we have in our film as an example. In fact, already up in Canada, there's talk at the Exopolitics Committee when Paul Hellyer, the Minister of Defense Canada, from the 1960s, it testified in our film that UFOs are as real as the airplanes that fly over your head, and he goes on to disclose to the public that this is a real phenomena. I mean, they're already talking about having the Canadian politicians see the film, and we want the same thing to happen here. I mean, and I know it's going to happen. I mean, the President of the United States is probably going to see this film. I'm sure it's going to happen, and many of the ex-presidents are going to see it. I mean, it's in the trades in Hollywood. It's in Hollywood Variety. We're on Anderson Cooper on CNN. I mean, when you get on Anderson Cooper, I mean, I'm sure someone has already alerted the president, and he will personally watch this movie.
Sure,
And what's he going to
sure.
say? He's probably going to want to know more. And I don't even think all of our presidents have had good access to UFOs since the 1950s, because they've turned a blind eye to the subject. But some of them have. I mean, there's evidence, and there is some evidence in our film that President Reagan, and also George Bush, is on to the subject.
Well, I guess one of the questions I should ask about Dan Aykroyd's, really his role here, is he really driving forward a community then? I mean, from his perspective, is this a film, or is it really the beginning of the crusade?
I think it's the beginning of the crusade, and it is the crusade, because no one has done what Dan is doing right now. I mean, going on show after show after show in a steady stream to really get people to wake up. I mean, Will Smith didn't, and Tommy Lee Jones didn't go on the media to say UFOs are real when they made Men in Black. Spielberg has never done it, even though he's really saying through making these films that he is a believer. I think Spielberg probably is a believer, but he hasn't personally disclosed it. And what's so perfect about Dan Aykroyd doing it is he's just a brilliant comic. He's a brilliant individual, and his personal insights and his passion in this film is really, I mean, it's kind of like if you've seen Dan Aykroyd in Ghostbusters and Coneheads and Blues Brothers and Dragnet and all of it, he's always leaned towards the paranormal. This is a first chance look at inside the mind of Dan Aykroyd.
Sure, sure. Well, and I think that the star power can have tremendous impact in terms of, one of the memorable moments for me was I saw, I believe it was called Roswell. I know there have been several movies made
Mm-hmm.
about it. It was probably the well-known one, and it was about the Jesse Marcel reunion. And I think most of the movie was probably fictional. I think that they came up with a semi-fictional plot to work through some of the stuff. But at the end of the movie, there was a part where he meets with kind of a Men in Black type fellow. They never really said who he was, but he kind of gave Jesse some questions to ponder, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that was played by Martin Sheen. And so
Mm-hmm.
I thought, that stuck with me, because I thought, well, this is Martin Sheen also an advocate for this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah,
interesting stuff.
absolutely. And there's more expert witness. The expert witness testimony in UFOs is so convincing. And then when you go to your extreme conservatives who don't believe in official NASA astronomers and scientists who say, "I'm sorry, it isn't happening. We're still looking." You look at Project SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, which is funded by people like Spielberg or contributors and Paul Allen, and you wonder, why do people like Seth Shostak at SETI even work there? Because they're not even open-minded to the subject of UFOs. They just shoot it down every time. So why did you get the job, working in those institutions?
Yeah,
And
as a counterpoint though, one of the things that I've noticed, and I think that this has gotten much worse over the last 15 years or so, is it almost seems like the UFO community has taken a very large turn towards the metaphorical. And I guess the thought that's kind of struck me has been that, from a personal perspective, I mean, I'd like to really see the thrust be similar to what Stephen Greer and yourself and Dan Aykroyd are working on in terms of, UFOs are real, there's something to it. And being able to get the public to work on that single piece of information.
mhm,
And the part that makes me nervous, I guess, is lately UFO culture has gone towards this. It's almost this personal experience, the I was abducted and my baby was stolen kind of a thing,
yeah, they turn the attention to that subject rather than let's focus on anti-gravity and and zero point energy, what we have to gain from this. I mean, here we are, clearly, with Al Gore's new movie out, An Uncertain Truth, that we're living we're living in a time of global warming and devastating weather patterns, and we're destroying our planet with our energy sources. And this technology is the answer. I mean, even Gary McKinnon, the computer hacker, who may face up to 70 years imprisonment for hacking into NASA and military computers, his whole passion was to find evidence of UFOs and zero-point energy.
I
And
think, yeah, I
in
think
the end,
it's
he believes that they have developed anti-gravity and zero-point energy technology that could save us from this crisis right now. And why aren't we doing anything with it?
I think that it's one of those cultural holdovers from the 20th century that we really need to find some answers to, that
Mm-hmm.
we need to find those so that our culture can really, in a way, be able to move on to that next step, to be able to put it behind us in some ways and move forward in others, otherwise, I mean, realistically, it's been what, 60 years, and we don't have, I mean, in terms of cultural, in terms of the American general public, we don't really know a heck of a lot more now than we did then.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, well, thanks again for your time, David. I sincerely appreciate it. And again, you've said that this movie is going to be appearing, again, the documentary with Dan Aykroyd, and it was Dan Aykroyd, The Case for UFOs. Was that what it was?
It's Dan Ackroyd, Unplugged on UFOs. You can
Unplugged
get it
on
at Best
UFOs.
Buy online. You can get it at Blockbuster Video online, Netflix.com. You can rent it. You can buy it at Amazon, or buy it at Best Buy online, and you can just go to your local video store, wherever you live, and ask them to carry it, and get it from Ingram, or get buy it at Amazon, and they can use it as a rental.
Okay. Well, thanks again for your time, David, and best of luck, and we'll continue to talk to you in the future.
Thanks, Tim.